remember coming to the store. This was, I think the closest grocery store to me. It's different, I hadn't been out here in several decades. Oh, man. I was 20, almost 21. Well, I was turning 21, and it was destroying me. It was so hurtful, understanding how much of my life was passing me by. And I was in prison for murder that I didn't commit.
This is Detective Mark Handy of the Louisville Police Assault Squad, September 29th, 1993. We are currently at the corner of Newburgh Road and Goldsmith Lane on a shooting and robbery investigation. On top of the counter is a 22-ounce Colt 45. This apparently was left on the counter by the suspect.
Just after 10 p.m. on September 28, 1993, a man entered a gas station in Louisville, Kentucky. He took a bottle of beer to the counter. He then shot and killed the clerk, 25-year-old Brenda Whitfield. The man fled with just $32 that was in the cash register. Police recovered 3 fingerprints from the beer bottle. Detectives focused their investigation on Edwin Chandler, although his fingerprints were not on the bottle. Chandler was known to the police. He had been convicted the year before for passing bad checks and was sentenced to a work release program. On his 21st birthday, rather than spending the night in a detention center, he went home and did not return. A warrant for his arrest was outstanding.
I just remember being at home and I was watching TV and seeing a commercial. It was called Louisville's Most Wanted. And I remember seeing that commercial and I remember seeing my face. And it was kind of surreal. Like, what is going on? Why am I on TV with Louisville's Most Wanted? Like, I ain't done nothing. I guess they faint memories now. I remember the bottom unit there was the unit that I lived in, me and my sister. I had dreams, big dreams and aspirations.
On October the 8th, Chandler went to a police station to deal with the outstanding arrest warrant and to tell them he was not involved in the shooting. He was interviewed for 2 hours and took a polygraph test.
I felt like I was explaining myself enough. I was explaining myself enough to where I had been and what I had done. And what I didn't understand was why this one particular cop didn't understand that, why he pressed the issue that I had committed this murder to the point to where it was just like, we know you did it. The cop slammed the radio down on the desk and he got so close in my face and, that close, he was yelling and spit flying on me. And definitely it shook me, Man, he had a gun on his waist. And he could have shot me or killed me, anything, right in this room, and it wouldn't have nothing have been said, but it would have been me. I was just like, well, what is it that you need me to do? Is it something that I can do to prevent any more threats or anything? Well, there's nothing you can do. You could just tell the truth.
During the 2-hour interrogation, police falsely told him his fingerprints had been found at the scene and that he had failed the polygraph. They also told him that if he did not confess, they would arrest his sister and take away her children.
That's when he slammed the radio down on the table. He said he had 2 police cars at my house right then, and he was gonna have them. It's all I need to do is pick up this radio, and I'll call, and I have her locked up right now, and they'll take them kids away, and they'll send them to see. She'll never see them again.
Larry Simon is Chandler's attorney.
When this detective said, you know, we got a police car at your sister's house. Edwin had said, I've been staying with my sister, and she has 2 little kids. That's my alibi, you know. And he says, well, we got a police car at your sister's house, and if you don't tell us that you did it, we're going to lock her up for harboring you, a fugitive, and we're going to put your niece and nephew in foster care. And that was the thing that Edwin said, okay, I'll tell you anything you want.
Chandler says the detectives promised that he would only receive a 5-year prison term if he confessed to the crime.
Because he knew I wasn't there, and so he knew I didn't have the information in the case. And so he gave me that. He gave me the information, you know, and in him giving me the information, I was still so scared. My mind was racing and rambling. I was trying to remember everything he said, and I couldn't. I couldn't remember everything he told me to say back over the tape. And that was the only thing, I think that was the one thing that saved my life 30 years later after all of this.
Chandler ultimately gave a 12-minute audio tape statement confessing to the crime. He was indicted on charges of first-degree robbery and capital murder. In January 1995, Chandler went to trial. He testified that his confession was false. But on February 10, 1995, the jury, after 16 hours of deliberation, convicted Chandler of manslaughter and first-degree robbery. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
I cried for about a week or two, just understanding that it was over. The one thing you got to understand in my situation and in this case is that the death penalty was on the table for me in this, you know, and they were really, really, really pushing for the death penalty in this. You know, I was empty. I didn't know, you know, what had happened. You know, I just didn't know. You know, I was crushed.
The Equal Justice Initiative say more than 3,000 people have been exonerated in the US since 1989. Since then, the non-profit calculates more than 27,200 years of jail time has been served by exonerated people for crimes they did not commit. And those figures appear to represent just a small fraction of the issue. Greg Swigert is an associate professor and staff attorney at Northwestern University's Center on Wrongful Convictions.
We represent people that we believe to be wrongfully convicted, and we get thousands of letters a year asking for us to take cases from around the country. It feels like, you know, in a way it feels like the mail. It just keeps coming and coming, and it never stops. We can only take a small handful of cases a year. We work on them for a long period of time.
According to a recent report by the National Registry of Exonerations, black people are more than 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder than white people. The registry also found a pattern of harsher sentences for blacks convicted of murdering white victims, and lighter sentences when the victims are black. A key breakthrough for overturning wrongful convictions, Swigert says, is DNA science.
DNA helped everyone in the criminal justice system, or many people in the criminal justice system, understand that it is a huge problem. And, you know, it helped expose the fact that people wrongfully confess, falsely confess. It exposes how bad eyewitness identification can be. And it also exposed issues like bad science, like bad arson science or bite marks or ballistics evidence. So there's a lot of so-called experts who say they are able to do things like to see someone's bite mark and look at someone's dental records and tell us that that is the person who made that mark on that person, and it's junk science.
Chandler maintained his innocence. In 2002, after serving 9 years in prison, he was released on parole. But he had not yet been cleared of wrongdoing. It took the involvement of the Kentucky Innocence Project for the case to be reopened. The fingerprints on the beer bottle were re-examined and were matched to a Percy Phillips, who was already serving jail time. In 2009, Chandler's convictions were vacated and the prosecution dismissed the charges.
At some point while I was sitting there, I think everything just flooded me. It just rushed back, everything that I had been through in prison, and I think everything just rushed me and it flooded me emotionally.
Chandler filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of Louisville. In October 2012, the lawsuit was settled for $8.5 million. In 2021, the police officer that forged Chandler's confession pleaded guilty to charges of perjury and evidence tampering in return for a sentence of 1 year in prison.
It's hard. It's difficult, thinking about, what this guy has done and how much of my life he's destroyed and taken away. It's difficult and hard, but I think all the more, I've forgiven him. I've forgiven the system. I've forgiven everybody involved that has done anything to me in this.
But not every exoneree receives compensation. 36 states and Washington, D.C. have laws that offer compensation for exonerees.
If you get that ruling and you get the certificate, what happens is you get a statutory amount of compensation depending on how many years that you've spent in prison. But it is capped at a certain point. So it's even if you've done 40 years, it wouldn't be much different than if you had done 20. If any, it wouldn't be different actually at all. And it's a decent chunk of money, but not for the amount of time that you've spent there.
But in the 14 states without such laws, at least 291 people have been wrongfully convicted since 1989, and other legal options can be expensive and unpredictable.
The other way that a lot of people seek compensation is sue the municipalities and the police officers and the people who help them, state actors who acted unconstitutionally and led to their wrongful conviction. And that is a long process that involves a lot of litigation that is not guaranteed to you, but it can lead to big verdicts.
Basically, it's up to that individual, the person wrongfully convicted, to find counsel to file a lawsuit against either the individual actors or the police department, the investigative agency that caused the wrongful conviction. And that unless a particular police practice that has been determined unconstitutional can be demonstrated by that person, then they may not have a claim, even though they were wrongfully convicted, because you have to show that the police acted in a manner that has been demonstrated in the past in that jurisdiction to be in violation of the Constitution. So it's a very high bar that an individual would normally have to reach and surpass to get compensation from the state.
Many states now mandate for all police interrogations to be recorded. The Innocence Project sees the move as the single best reform available to protect against false confessions.
We have now enacted laws where interrogations are taped for certain crimes. It doesn't solve everything in terms of that, but that's just one kind of reform that's been enacted since the kind of Innocence revolution.
The Equal Justice Initiative say there are more innocent people in prison today than ever before, and at the core of the issue is justice.
Miss Whitfield she never has gotten the justice she deserves in this, you know. Her family never got the chance really to really grieve and let it be done. They've had to grieve and then grieve and then grieve and then grieve. It's not necessarily a fight against the police or the prosecutors or the judges. It's just a fight for justice.